I found the photograph in a leather-bound album at an estate auction in Savannah, Georgia. It was early March, one of those days when winter still clings to the morning air, but the afternoon promises warmth. The auction was being held at a Greek Revival mansion on Bull Street, emptying the contents of a home that had belonged to the Worthington family since 1823. The estate had passed through 7 generations before the last heir. An elderly woman with no children died and left everything to be liquidated. The photograph album was in a mahogany secretary desk, tucked into a secret compartment behind a false drawer back. It was as if someone had deliberately hidden it, wanted it preserved but concealed. The album contained perhaps 20 photographs from the mid-1800s, most showing the expected scenes: formal family portraits, garden parties, children posed stiffly in their best clothes. But one photograph was different. It had been placed near the back of the album, and someone had written across the bottom margin, in faded ink, "The Worthington Household, July 1856. The image showed an opulent parlor with high ceilings, ornate moldings, heavy curtains framing tall windows, a crystal chandelier barely visible at the top of the frame. 5 white men stood in a precise semicircle, all wearing formal black suits with waistcoats and bow ties, their postures rigid and commanding. They looked down at 5 black women who knelt on an elaborate patterned rug in the center of the room. The women wore plain servant dresses, simple gray or brown fabrics with white aprons, their hair covered with white caps. They sat in submissive positions, heads slightly bowed, hands folded or resting on their laps. The composition suggested a formal ritual, something practiced and deliberate. The men's expressions were cold, almost clinical, as they gazed down at the kneeling women. But there was something else. The woman on the far right, her position was slightly different from the others. While the other 4 women had their hands visible, folded neatly in front of them, this woman's right hand was partially hidden by the folds of her dress. And if you looked very carefully, you could see that her hidden hand appeared to be clutching something, gripping an object that was mostly concealed, but created a small bulge in the fabric. On the back of the photograph, in the same faded handwriting, someone had written, "Annual accounting, Worthington Plantation present, Master Harrison, Mr. Nathaniel, Mr. Charles, Mr. Robert, Mr. Thomas, July 4th, 1856. And below that, in different ink, darker, more recent, another hand had added, "Look at the woman on the right. Look at what she's holding. They thought they could hide it forever." I examined the photograph under magnification. The hidden object in the woman's hand was small but distinct. It created a rectangular bulge, perhaps 3 inches long, maybe an inch wide. Something deliberately concealed, gripped tightly enough that her knuckles showed tension even through the faded image. I bought the entire album for $300. The auctioneer, a middle-aged man with a drawl that suggested old Savannah families, told me the Worthingtons had been one of the wealthiest planting families in coastal Georgia, with rice and cotton operations that made them rich even by antebellum standards. The family mansion had been sold decades ago, subdivided into apartments. Most of the family records had been lost or destroyed during Sherman's march through Georgia in 1864. Over the following months, I became consumed with understanding what this photograph was really documenting. I started at the Georgia Historical Society, searching through plantation records, census data, newspaper archives, and what remained of the Worthington family papers. From the 1850 census, Harrison Worthington, age 52, planter, real estate value, $35,000, 47 enslaved persons. Household includes wife, Margaret Worthington, sons Nathaniel, age 26, Charles, age 24, Robert, age 21, Thomas, age 19. From plantation ledgers preserved at the Historical Society, the Worthington Plantation, Oak Grove, comprised 1,200 acres along the Ogeechee River. Primary crops were rice and Sea Island cotton. The enslaved population ranged from 45 to 52 people during the 1850s, with detailed records kept of each person: names, ages, work assignments, monetary valuations, purchases, sales, births, deaths. But when I searched through the ledgers for July of 1856, I found something unusual. There was a gap in the records. Entries stopped abruptly on July 3rd and didn't resume until July 6th. 3 days missing from what had otherwise been meticulous daily accounting. I found a reference to this gap in a letter written in 1857 by Margaret Worthington to her sister in Charleston. February 8th, 1857. Dearest Caroline, I write to you with a heavy heart, though I know I must not speak of certain matters even to my beloved sister. The events of last July still weigh upon my conscience, though Harrison insists I am being foolishly sentimental, and that the matter was handled correctly according to law and custom. I cannot provide details, but I will say that the annual accounting revealed a discrepancy that required immediate and severe correction. Harrison and our sons conducted the investigation themselves, following procedures that have been established in this region for generations. The matter was resolved, though I confess the resolution troubles my sleep even now. Months later. I know you will understand my meaning without requiring explicit explanation. These are matters that must be handled within the family, never spoken of outside our walls. Harrison says I dishonor him by allowing my sensibilities to be troubled by the proper management of our property, but I cannot help what I feel in the quiet hours of the night. Please burn this letter after reading, as Harrison would be most displeased to know I have written even these vague references to you. Your troubled sister, Margaret. I found more information in the diary of a neighboring planter, Thomas Middleton, whose plantation adjoined Oak Grove. July 6, 1856. Called upon Harrison Worthington this afternoon, and found the household in a state of unusual quiet. Harrison was cordial, but clearly wished to keep my visit brief. He mentioned that they had conducted their annual accounting 2 days prior, and that a difficult matter had been resolved. I did not press for details, as every planter understands that certain aspects of plantation management are not discussed openly, even among friends. But I noted that several of the house servants appeared subdued, and one was conspicuously absent, the woman Patience, who usually attended to visitors' needs. Harrison mentioned in passing that an example had been made, and that he expected no further difficulties of similar nature. I understood his meaning and did not inquire further. I searched through the Worthington plantation ledgers for any mention of someone named Patience. I found her records: Patience, female, born 1828, purchased 1842 from the estate sale of Robert Hammond, assigned to house service, valued at $1,200 in 1855. And then, in the ledger entry dated July 6, 1856, written in different ink from the surrounding entries: Patience, deceased July 4, 1856. Cause, punishment following theft. Monetary loss, $1,200. I found a newspaper notice from the Savannah Daily Morning News, July 9, 1856. Notice of property loss. Mr. Harrison Worthington of Oak Grove Plantation reports the death of a female servant, Patience, on July 4th. Death resulted from lawful punishment following confirmed theft. No inquest required per Georgia statute regarding management of private property. Value declared for tax purposes, $1,200. In the mid-1800s, enslaved people were legally property, and slave owners had near absolute authority over their punishment, including corporal punishment that could result in death. As long as the death occurred during what was claimed to be lawful discipline, no criminal investigation was required. The slave owner simply reported the monetary loss for tax purposes, the way one might report a dead horse or broken equipment. I found more details in a letter written years later by one of the Worthington sons, Charles Worthington, to his brother Robert. March 1863. Dear brother, your letter finds me in winter quarters with the regiment, and your question about the events of July 1856 brings back memories I had hoped were long buried. But as you say, with the war going badly and the possibility that our entire way of life may be destroyed, perhaps it is time to set down the truth of what occurred that day, lest the story be lost or misremembered. You will recall that Father instituted the annual accounting as a means of maintaining order and discipline across the plantation. Each July 4th, he would gather the house servants for a formal examination, reviewing the household inventory, questioning each servant about their knowledge of any irregularities, and making clear the consequences of theft or deception. That year, the accounting revealed that Mother's sapphire brooch, the one Grandmother had brought from England, was missing from her jewelry case. Father conducted the investigation with his customary thoroughness. He had each house servant questioned separately, and when Patience's answers seemed evasive, he ordered a search of the servants' quarters. The brooch was found hidden beneath a loose floorboard in the cabin Patience shared with 2 other women. When confronted, Patience initially denied knowledge of how it came to be there, then claimed another servant had placed it there to implicate her, then finally admitted she had taken it, though she offered various contradictory explanations for why she had done so. Father assembled all of us, you, myself, Nathaniel, Thomas, and himself, in the formal parlor. He had the 5 house servants brought in and made to kneel before us. He wanted the lesson to be witnessed, to be remembered, to serve as deterrent against future theft. He pronounced sentence according to his authority and the customs of the region, 50 lashes for theft of property, valued at more than $100. Patience was taken to the courtyard for punishment, while the other servants were made to remain kneeling in the parlor, listening to what was occurring outside, understanding what awaited anyone who followed her example. I will not describe the punishment in detail. You were present and remember as well as I do. I will say only that Father's anger made him more severe than perhaps he intended. The overseer delivered the lashes while we watched. Patience endured perhaps 30 before she lost consciousness. She died that evening, never having regained awareness. Father was shaken, though he would never admit it. Mother took to her bed for 2 days. We buried Patience in the plantation cemetery with no marker, as was customary for such cases. Father reported the financial loss to the tax assessor and the death to the newspaper, all as required by law. The matter was legally resolved. No crime had been committed in the eyes of the law. A master had exercised his right to punish theft, and if the punishment proved fatal, that was his prerogative and his financial loss to bear. But I confess to you, brother, that I have thought often of that day in the years since. Not from any abolitionist sentiment, you understand. I fight for our cause and our rights as firmly as any man. But I wonder sometimes about Patience's insistence that she had not taken the brooch, about the desperation in her face when she saw that no explanation would save her, about the fact that the brooch mysteriously reappeared in Mother's jewelry case 2 months later when the maid was cleaning, found wedged behind the drawer backing, apparently having slipped through a gap we had not noticed. I wonder if we killed an innocent woman that day. I wonder if the brooch had never been stolen at all, had simply been mislaid by Mother and discovered by servants who were too frightened to admit they had found it after Patience was already accused. I will never know the truth. None of us will. But I think sometimes that father wonders too, late at night when he walks the grounds alone. I have seen him pause by the unmarked section of the cemetery where we buried her. I have seen something in his face that might be doubt, or might be regret, though he would never speak such words aloud. This is the truth of July 4th, 1856, as I remember it. Do with it what you will. If the war ends badly and our papers are discovered, perhaps someone will judge us harshly for what we did that day. But we acted according to the law and the customs of our time and place. If those laws were unjust, that is not a question I am qualified to answer. Your brother, Charles III, found confirmation of the later discovery of the brooch in Margaret Worthington's diary, September 12, 1856. A disturbing discovery today. While Sarah was cleaning my dressing room, she found my mother's sapphire brooch wedged behind the backing of the jewelry case drawer. It must have slipped through a gap I had not noticed. The case is old, and the drawer construction is not as tight as it once was. I showed it to Harrison immediately. His face went quite pale, though he said nothing at first. Then he declared that the brooch Sarah found could not possibly be the same one, that Patience must have hidden it there before her punishment, or that there had been 2 brooches all along, or some other explanation I could not quite follow, because he spoke so rapidly and with such vehemence. I did not argue with him, but I know what I see. This is my mother's brooch, the same one that went missing in July, the same one we found in Patience's quarters, and that led to her punishment and death. Which means we may have been wrong. Which means Patience may have been telling the truth when she said she had not taken it, that she did not know how it came to be in her cabin, that someone must have placed it there. Which means we killed her for a theft she did not commit. I cannot speak these thoughts aloud. Harrison will not hear them, will not consider the possibility that we made a mistake. He insists the matter is closed, that doubt serves no purpose, that a master must be decisive and cannot second-guess his own authority. But I cannot forget Patience's face when sentence was pronounced, the confusion, the terror, the desperate attempts to make us understand she was innocent. I dismissed those pleas as the lies of a guilty woman caught in her crime. But what if they were the truth of an innocent woman facing death for something she had not done? I have been unable to sleep well since Sarah found the brooch. I wake in the dark hours thinking of Patience, wondering if her spirit cries out for justice, wondering what answer I will give on Judgment Day, when God asks me why I stood silent while an innocent woman was murdered in my home. Harrison has forbidden me from discussing this matter with anyone, including him. The case is closed. The loss has been accounted for. We move forward and do not look back. But I look back, in the darkness, and I see Patience's face. I found the most detailed account in a memoir written in 1903 by a woman named Sarah Mitchell, who had been enslaved at Oak Grove Plantation as a young woman. From My Life in Bondage and Freedom by Sarah Mitchell, published 1903. I was 22 years old in the summer of 1856, working as a house servant at Oak Grove Plantation in Georgia. It was the worst year of my life, and I have lived through many hard years. Every July 4th, Master Worthington conducted what he called the annual accounting. All the house servants, there were 5 of us, would be brought into the formal parlor and made to kneel on the carpet, while the master and his 4 sons stood in a semicircle around us. They would review the household inventory, question us about missing items, and remind us of the punishments that awaited thieves and liars. It was meant to intimidate us, to keep us fearful and obedient. And it worked. We dreaded July 4th more than any other day of the year. That year, Mrs. Worthington's sapphire brooch had gone missing. It was a valuable piece, brought from England by the master's mother. When the brooch could not be found in early July, Master Worthington announced there would be a thorough investigation during the annual accounting. On July 4th, we 5 house servants were brought to the parlor and made to kneel while the 5 white men, the master and his 4 sons, stood around us in that semicircle formation they always used. Master Worthington questioned each of us about the brooch. None of us knew anything about it. But the master did not believe us. He ordered the overseer to search our quarters. They found the brooch hidden under a floorboard in the cabin where Patience lived with 2 other women. Patience swore she had not taken it, that she had never seen it before, that someone must have placed it there to blame her. But no one believed her. Why would anyone else hide stolen property in her cabin? It made no sense. Master Worthington pronounced sentence: 50 lashes for theft of property, valued at more than $100. It was within his legal right. The law gave masters absolute authority to punish their slaves, however they saw fit for theft or disobedience. They made us remain kneeling in the parlor, while Patience was taken to the courtyard. We could hear everything: the crack of the whip, Patience's screams, her begging for mercy, her insistence that she was innocent, her cries for God to witness the truth. After 30 lashes, the sounds stopped. The overseer came in to report that Patience had lost consciousness. Master Worthington ordered them to revive her and continue. But she never woke up. She died that evening, her back torn open, having maintained her innocence to the very end. We buried her in an unmarked grave in the corner of the plantation cemetery, reserved for slaves. No minister spoke over her. No marker was placed. She simply disappeared from the world as if she had never existed, except as a $1,200 loss in the master's account book. 2 months later, I was cleaning Mrs. Worthington's dressing room when I found the sapphire brooch wedged behind the backing of her jewelry case drawer. It had slipped through a gap in the old furniture, was hidden there all along. I brought it to Mrs. Worthington immediately. Her face went white. She understood what this meant, that Patience had been innocent, that the brooch had never been stolen, that we had killed a woman for a crime that had never occurred. But Master Worthington would not accept this. He insisted the brooch I found could not be the same one, or that Patience must have hidden it there before her death, or that there had been 2 brooches all along. He forbade anyone from speaking of it again. I realized then what had actually happened, though I could never prove it and never dared speak it aloud while I was still enslaved. Someone had planted that brooch in Patience's cabin, someone who knew about the annual accounting, who knew the master would search for stolen goods, who knew Patience would be blamed. I believe it was one of the master's sons. The youngest one, Thomas, had made advances toward Patience that she had refused. She had come to me in tears one night, saying that Master Thomas kept cornering her in the hallways, touching her, demanding she submit to him. She had refused as clearly as any enslaved woman could refuse a white man's advances, which is to say, she had tried to avoid him, had never been alone with him, had rebuffed him as subtly as she could manage without openly defying him. But Master Thomas was 19 years old, spoiled, used to getting what he wanted. When Patience continued to refuse him, he needed to punish her. And what better punishment than to ensure she was accused of theft during the annual accounting? I believe he took his mother's brooch and hid it in Patience's cabin, knowing it would be found during the search, knowing his father would never believe her denials. I believe he murdered her to satisfy his wounded pride at being refused by a woman he considered his property. But I could never prove it. And even if I could have proven it, who would have cared? Patience was property. Her death was legal. Master Worthington had every right under Georgia law to punish theft with as much severity as he deemed appropriate. Even unto death. The law saw no crime. The law saw only a master exercising his prerogative and suffering a financial loss when his punishment proved fatal. But I knew the truth. Patience died innocent. She was murdered not for theft, but for refusing to be raped. And her murder was legal because she was enslaved, because the law gave white men absolute power over black bodies, because our lives were valued only in dollars, and our deaths required no justice, only an accounting of monetary loss. The photograph taken that day shows the 5 of us kneeling before the 5 white men in that semicircle. We look submissive, obedient, accepting of our place. But look closely at Patience on the far right. Look at her hand, partially hidden in the folds of her dress. She is clutching a small piece of paper. It was a note I had given her that morning, before the annual accounting began. She had asked me to write something for her. She could not read or write herself. She had dictated the words, and I had written them on a scrap of paper, torn from the edge of a newspaper. The note said, "I am innocent. I did not steal. God knows the truth." She clutched that note throughout the questioning, throughout the search, throughout the sentencing. She held it hidden in her hand, that small piece of paper, with her truth written on it, the truth no one would believe. When they took her to the courtyard for punishment, they pried the note from her hand and threw it away. But in that photograph, you can see her clutching it, holding on to her innocence, in the only way she could. Keeping her truth close, even when everyone around her had decided she was lying. That photograph documents murder, disguised as legal punishment. It shows a woman clutching evidence of her innocence, even as she faces death for a crime she did not commit. It shows 5 white men standing in judgment over 5 black women, exercising the absolute power that slavery gave them. Power to accuse, to investigate, to judge, to punish, to kill, all without any oversight, any justice, any accountability beyond a financial loss reported to the tax assessor. Patience died that day. She died, insisting she was innocent. And 2 months later, we learned she had been right all along. But her death remained legal, remained justified, remained recorded only as a monetary loss in the master's account books. This is what slavery was. Not just forced labor, but absolute power exercised over human beings who had no recourse, no appeal, no protection from violence that was sanctioned by law and blessed by custom. I found one more document, a letter written in 1901 by Thomas Worthington to his daughter, apparently attempting some form of deathbed confession. November 1901. My dear daughter, I am writing this in the awareness that my health is failing, and I may not live to see another spring. There are matters I must confess before I face judgment, sins I must acknowledge, even though I cannot undo them. In the summer of 1856, when I was 19 years old, I did something terrible. There was a woman enslaved on our plantation named Patience. She was beautiful, and I desired her. I made my intentions clear to her repeatedly, but she refused me with every excuse she could muster, while still showing the deference required of her station. Her refusals enraged me. I was young, entitled, accustomed to having my desires satisfied immediately. I could not understand why this woman would not submit to me when I had absolute power over her. In my anger, I devised a plan. I took my mother's sapphire brooch from her jewelry case and hid it beneath the floorboards in Patience's cabin. I knew the annual accounting was approaching. I knew my father would search for stolen goods. I knew Patience would be blamed. I did not intend for her to die. I thought she would be whipped, humiliated, broken in spirit so that she would no longer refuse me. But my father's punishment was more severe than I anticipated. Patience died that day, maintaining her innocence to the very end. 2 months later, my mother found her brooch wedged in the backing of her jewelry case. It had apparently never been stolen at all, had simply slipped through a gap in the old furniture. But everyone except me knew the truth, that I had taken it and hidden it in Patience's cabin, that I had manufactured the theft, that I had murdered an innocent woman to satisfy my wounded pride. My father suspected. I saw it in his eyes when the brooch was found, saw him watching me, calculating. But he said nothing. To acknowledge what I had done would have required admitting we had killed an innocent woman. Better to insist the brooch my mother found was different, or had been hidden by Patience before her death, or any other explanation that avoided the truth. My brothers suspected. My mother knew. But the family closed ranks around the lie, because acknowledging the truth would have shattered something essential in how we understood ourselves and our place in the world. I have carried this guilt for 45 years. I murdered Patience as surely as if I had wielded the whip myself. I murdered her to punish her for refusing to be raped. Murdered her because I could, because the law gave me the power to destroy her life and call it justice. I tell you this now so that someone will know the truth. Patience was innocent. She died for a crime she did not commit, murdered by a system that valued her at $1,200, but gave her no protection, no voice, no justice. I will face God's judgment for what I did. I do not expect mercy, nor do I deserve it. But I wanted you to know the truth before I die. Wanted someone to acknowledge that Patience was innocent, that her death was murder, that the system that made her death legal was evil beyond description. I die knowing I destroyed an innocent woman's life. I die knowing the law called it justice. I die knowing I was never punished, never held accountable, never faced any consequences beyond my own conscience. May God have mercy on my soul. May someone remember Patience and speak the truth about what was done to her. Your father, Thomas Worthington. I donated the photograph and all related documents to the Smithsonian National Museum of African American History and Culture. The photograph is now part of an exhibition on slavery, violence, and the legal systems that protected white supremacy. The exhibition text reads, "The Worthington Plantation Photograph, July 4th, 1856. This photograph documents the annual accounting at Oak Grove Plantation in Georgia. 5 white men, the plantation owner Harrison Worthington and his 4 sons, stand in a semicircle around 5 kneeling black women who were enslaved house servants. The annual accounting was a ritual of domination, a formal ceremony in which enslaved people were questioned about missing property, reminded of the punishments awaiting theft or disobedience, and forced to physically demonstrate their subjugation. This particular annual accounting ended in murder. One of the kneeling women, Patience, was accused of stealing her owner's sapphire brooch. She was sentenced to 50 lashes. She died during the punishment, having maintained her innocence throughout. 2 months later, the brooch was found in the owner's jewelry case, where it had apparently been all along, having slipped behind the drawer backing. Patience had been innocent. She had died for a crime that had never occurred. This photograph is significant because it documents the moment before murder, the investigation, the accusation, the power dynamics that would result in an innocent woman's death. Look closely at the woman on the far right, Patience. Her hand is partially hidden in her dress, and she appears to be clutching something. According to testimony from another enslaved woman who survived, Patience was holding a small note that read, "I am innocent. I did not steal. God knows the truth." She held this note throughout the investigation, throughout the sentencing, kept her truth close, even when no one would believe her. When she was taken for punishment, the note was pried from her hand and thrown away. This photograph asks us to see a formal family gathering, a routine exercise of plantation management. Look more closely. See the power imbalance made visible in the standing and kneeling positions. See the white men looking down in judgment on black women, forced to kneel before them. See Patience clutching evidence of her innocence that no one will believe. See murder about to happen, sanctioned by law, enabled by a system that gave white men absolute power over black bodies, and called it property rights, called it justice, called it the natural order of things. Patience died on July 4th, 1856. Her death was legal. No investigation was required. No charges were filed. Her owner simply reported a monetary loss of $1,200 and moved on with his life. This is what slavery was, not just forced labor, but a system of absolute violence, where black lives could be destroyed on the whim of white authority, where innocent people could be murdered without consequence, where justice was impossible because the law itself was designed to protect white supremacy and treat black people as property rather than human beings with rights. This photograph is Patience's memorial. It documents the moment before her murder. It shows her clutching proof of her innocence. It serves as evidence of a crime that the law did not recognize, a murder that was called legal punishment, an injustice that was framed as justice. Look at her hand. See what she's holding. That small piece of paper. Her truth written down, her innocence documented even though no one would believe it. They thought they could hide it forever. They thought her death would be forgotten, would disappear into the past, would be remembered only as a line item in an account book recording financial loss. But this photograph remains, and Patience's truth remains. And we remember what was done to her in the name of law and order and property rights. The photograph hangs in the exhibition now, behind protective glass. 5 white men in formal suits standing in a semicircle. 5 black women kneeling on an ornate carpet. And one detail that reveals the truth: Patience's partially hidden hand clutching that small piece of paper, holding on to her innocence in the only way she could. It was just a formal family gathering, just a routine annual accounting, just plantation management exercising legal authority over property. Until you look at that one detail, until you see what patience is holding, until you understand what this photograph documents, the moment before murder, the assertion of innocence that would be ignored, the truth that would be suppressed for 150 years. Look at her hand. She's clutching her truth. She's holding proof of her innocence. And within hours of this photograph being taken, she would be dead, murdered legally, killed by the system that claimed she had no rights, that white men were bound to respect, destroyed by the absolute power that slavery gave to white men over black bodies. This is what the photograph shows. Not a family gathering, but a crime scene. Not plantation management, but murder in progress. Not justice, but the legal erasure of an innocent woman's life, documented in this image for anyone who knows how to read it, for anyone who looks closely at that one detail that reveals the horrifying truth.